welcome back to the Love and Fidelity Network annual conference. If you're just joining us now, my name is Dr. Jennifer Frey, and I'll be your moderator for this evening. Before we launch into the second part of the conference, we'd like to recognize one of our weekend sponsors, the Pontifical John Paul II Institute. A longtime philosopher friend of Karl Wojtyla, otherwise known as Pope St. John Paul II, said that Wojtyla had always been occupied with understanding the human person in terms of love. The mission of the Pontifical John Paul II Institute begins in this abiding conviction of the late Holy Father that love reveals the meaning of the person, and through the person, all flesh and the whole of creation. The Pontifical John Paul II Institute is devoted to the study of this truth about the human person in all of its dimensions: theological, philosophical, anthropological, and indeed, cosmological scientific. The Institute centers its study of the person in the community that is the original cell of human society, marriage and family. Visit johnpaul2.edu for a more detailed look at their programs and send any questions to information@johnpaul2.edu. Our next guest this evening is Anna Moreland. And in just a few minutes, I'm going to start asking Anna your questions from the chat boxes live right here. But for now, I'll explain more about how we will select those questions after Anna's presentation. For now, I just want to make sure that you hit the like or the subscribe button and then start dropping your questions into the chat, either on Facebook or on YouTube. We only have a limited amount of Anna's time, so please try to choose your questions carefully. Anna Bonta Moreland is the Anne Quinn Welsh Endowed Director of the Honors Program and an Associate Professor in the Department of Humanities at Villanova University. Her areas of research include faith and reason, medieval theology with an emphasis on Thomas Aquinas, the theology of religious pluralism, and comparative theology, especially between Christianity and Islam. She has written Known by Nature, Thomas Aquinas on the Natural Knowledge of God, and she's edited New Voices in Catholic Theology. She has also just recently published Muhammad Reconsidered, a Christian Perspective on Islamic Prophecy from Notre Dame Press. Dr. Moreland completed this work as the Miser Fellow at the University of Notre Dame's Center for Ethics and Culture. Her current book projects include a co-written manuscript with Dr. Thomas Smith titled The College Guide to Adulting, How to Major in Life, and also a manuscript on method and comparative theology. Please welcome Dr. Anna Moreland to the show.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm delighted to be here with you. I'm really grateful for the technology that allows us to be together and for the team behind the scenes that's doing all this work. It's a little high tech for us academics, but I think we'll survive. I have a lot to say, so I'm just going to get started. So if you ask adults what their most important decision was, what their most important question was in their adult life, they'll say, most of them will say, whom I chose to marry. And yet if you ask today's college students whether they thought about marriage or dating even, they'll look at you in abject horror and say, are you kidding me? I have to focus on me, on my career. They expect a spouse to magically appear, say when they turn about 30, appear on their doorstep and then poof, they'll know how to date, they'll know how to be in a serious relationship, and they'll know how to choose whom to marry, just like in the movies. Well, I'm here with a big bucket of cold water, ready to dump it on your head. If you don't learn how to date and be in a relationship in your teens and early 20s, you're in for some serious heartbreak by the time you're 30. So as I started to look into the desert that is the college dating environment, I assumed the problem was the hookup culture. That's kind of what we all assume. It turns out that there's a deeper problem. It's loneliness. Young people are actually not hooking up that much, but they're desperately lonely. The national data about how many young people are actually hooking up shows a downward trend in casual sex across college campuses. And yet the hookup culture affects social life in ways that often escape documentation in social science surveys. In other words, students can opt out of hooking up, and yet their imaginations are still shaped by that culture. In fact, opting out is actually a reaction to that culture. One student writes, "In my experience in college so far, I can't find anything other than hookup culture. When I see couples, I get confused because I truly do not know how they found each other. How do you start dating when everyone is too afraid of expressing their feelings for fear of sounding too clingy or not masculine enough? Everyone is assuming the worst and acting according to these assumptions, even if they're not true. For example, girls assume all guys want is sex, and guys assume it's their job as a man to sleep with as many girls as possible. Of course, neither of these are always true, but hookup culture perpetuates both of these stereotypes. This culture makes each gender act according to these assumptions, and overall, no one wins." This is a student. So while many recognize that hooking up and opting out are poor substitutes for an actual love life, they often believe there's plenty of time to get things straight in their 20s. But the reality is just the opposite. When at age 25 you realize you want to move away from bars and swiping and towards something real, you might not know how. Or at 28, when you realize that your fertility has peaked and you're nowhere near getting a steady boyfriend, you might look back and wish that things had been different. You need something better than the two choices on offer. You deserve something more than hooking up or opting out. Tonight we're going to do two things. First, we're going to rebuild our vocabulary around romance and dating. And second, we'll offer practical strategies to give you the courage to start to date. So first, the vocabulary. It's time to talk about Eros. For the ancient Greeks, Eros wasn't just about sex. Next slide, please. It was about so much more. Erotic love is a powerful force and central to human living. But it's also hard to control, and it's risky. We're creatures built for love, whether we opt out or we order in. Both hooking up and opting out attempt to control a desire that is at the heart of who we are as human beings. To reduce Eros to sex is to try to control one of our deepest desires by making it into something mechanical and transactional. It's easier to pretend that our desire for love is just about sex. If that were true, all we'd need to do is scratch this itch once in a while and we'd be satisfied. Or we could convince ourselves that our desire for sex can be repressed and redirected into studying, exercising, or working. A lot of my students do this. But those who hook up and those who opt out both reduce the desire for love to the desire for sex. They're just opting for different sides of the same coin. Plato calls Eros a divine madness. Let's take the madness part first. It's born from an encounter with someone or something you find so attractive that you momentarily forget yourself. It's madness because all your carefully laid plans suddenly fly out the window. You feel like you're going crazy because everything stable in your life is suddenly thrown upside down. This is why we say, "I'm head over heels for him" when we're in love. Erotic love is a disruptor, especially of your own sense of who you are and what you thought you wanted. Think about almost every romantic comedy you've ever watched. There's usually a hero or a heroine who's obsessed with work, or who has given up on love, or who has gotten so used to playing the field. Her life is settled and she thinks she knows how to manage Eros, until the one comes along and the plot line of her life is completely disrupted. Cue the comedy and the touching resolution. This is actually what love does to you. It forces a fundamental reevaluation of who you are and what your life is about. American poet Christian Weiman says this about meeting his future wife. "When I met Danielle, not only was that gray veil between me and the world ripped aside, colors aching back into things, but all the particulars of the world suddenly seemed in excess of themselves, and thus more truly themselves. When you fall in love, you're broken open and something new is born. This is why Plato thought Eros participates in a divine kind of life." This kind of love is also ecstatic. Ecstasy comes from two Greek words that mean stand out of yourself. We find ourselves moving out of the comfortable places we inhabit, with a desire to come together with the object of our affection. There's clearly a sexual dimension to this, but there's more than that, An erotic attraction means that I want to know the person better so that I can love her more. And in turn, I want the object of my affection to know and love me. To know and be known, to love and be loved. We long for this kind of intimacy. We are built for this mutuality. It involves the soul and our longing for beauty, meaning, and purpose. It forces us out of ourselves and toward the knowledge and love of another person. Eros is at work not just when we fall in love with someone. There's an erotic dimension to much of what we do and long for as human beings. So think about when you're writing a paper or you're working on a physics experiment or a math experiment and you're kind of banging your head up against the wall, and then all of a sudden you get that insight or you're able to solve that problem and you feel it in your whole body. That insight kind of floods your body. That's an erotic moment. There's an eros to human loving and human knowing. Or you're going on a long hike and all of a sudden you stop and you see this beautiful vista and this sense of peace kind of invades you. There's an erotic dimension to that. These are erotic moments. For Plato, eros is a profound longing wrapped up in everything we come to know and do. It's the strong impulse that leads us out of our temptation to being closed in on ourselves. Eros invites us to look beyond ourselves and into a wider world waiting to be known and loved. The key is to learn to direct this erotic longing toward people and things that will give us joy, that will make us more rather than less human. If directed appropriately, Eros is in fact a profoundly good force in human living. Eros builds cathedrals. It writes music that moves our souls. It leads us to create and connect. It makes us more of who we are, and it makes us fall in love. Eros breaks the heart open so that it can love the way it's supposed to. Well, that's easier said than done. If Eros is a kind of divine madness, and if it involves this thrilling risk of learning to deal with a new sense of myself as I become more intimate with someone, then figuring out who to let in, how to take the right risks, how to take things slow, when to speed things up, when to trust, how to drop my guard, what to do with misunderstanding, how to stop playing games. All that is really difficult. It requires some thought, intention, and courage. But hooking up and opting out don't help me navigate these problems. In a culture awash in sexual images, in our social media, in our advertising, on our TVs and computer screens, a lot of people might say that the cure for what ails us is to have less erotic stuff around. Of course, porn and advertising objectify men and women, but precisely because we're awash in attempts to reduce eros to sex, we need to fix things not by demanding less sex, but by asking much more from erotic love. Erotic love is the deep longing to reach completion by reaching out for a union with another person who is deeply attractive. Not just physically attractive, but humanly attractive. People who stand toe-to-toe with us as equals and help make us better versions of ourselves. So the first step in kind of rebuilding our vocabulary is eros and erotic loving and a rehabilitated sense of what erotic loving is. The second is what I use in class a lot is this house metaphor. I find that young people, they've got a lot of trouble about what rooms they're supposed to be in. A lot of times they're rushing up to the bedroom when really they just want to have a cup of coffee on the front porch. They don't need to even cross the threshold into their homes. So you want to start to think about navigating relationships in terms of inviting people into your homes. You invite them into the porch, conversation goes well, you might invite them to the living room. You might have some snacks. Things go really well, you might end up in the kitchen. Kitchen's a place where you want to spend a lot of time. No sense rushing out of the kitchen or the dining room, right? Sharing meals. Becoming an adult is a process in learning to navigate the boundaries in your different relationships. Now, this is going to be difficult. It involves a whole new kind of imagination. The reason why the slide that you're seeing now is of a P area, a pet relief area in an airport, is that what I'm asking you to do with dating is what airports around the country have started to do not that long ago. They started to develop these P stations, right? These pet relief areas that didn't exist like a couple of years ago. I think the first time I saw one was in Logan Airport in Boston. And I was like, what is that? But then you get to used to them, and you're walking down the airport and you see a pet relief area and you know exactly what it's for. All kind of not, not all of a sudden, but over a short period of time, pet relief areas become part of a normal landscape of an airport, of any airport, right? The need was there, the imagination was there, and now it's part of our regular airport landscape. I think young people have lost the social script of dating. I think it's time to rehabilitate dating, not by bringing back the 1950s, but by kind of implementing this 5-step process that I've used that my students have found really helpful. It's time to create our own P stations vis-a-vis dating in your teens and 20s. So I've adopted in class a dating assignment that Carrie Cronin at Boston College started some years ago. She started it several years ago. I've been doing it for about 10 years now, where students, and actually in a class that I was teaching yesterday, I wasn't planning on offering these students the dating assignment. They were supposed to be like mature and older because they're seniors. And I was kind of horrified by our conversation, so much so that at the end of class yesterday, I said, I'm assigning a dating assignment to you. And by the end of the evening, I had sent this out. So let me tell you about Dr. Cronin's dating assignment. So you have to ask somebody out who's a legitimate interest. It's got to be a short date, about 45 to 90 minutes. You can only tell about 3 friends, so that's not to create like some unnecessary drama. You have to ask out in person. That's huge, 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 huge. It's a much more humane way to ask somebody out. You have to have a definite plan, a simple plan for the date. Could be a coffee date, super easy. You have to pay for the date yourself with no fuss. And there's no group dating, no third wheels or wingmen allowed. The dating assignments usually don't end up in a relationship. Almost always they don't. But that's the point. That's the point, is to get yourself running, to just get yourself in the practice of asking people out, of talking to people on the front porch where those initial conversations belong. Dating shouldn't come with outsized expectations about physical touch or emotional intimacy. Like running, it's casual but intentional. If you've become a runner, you know those first couple times, you hate it. You absolutely hate it. But you've run 10, 20, 30 times, and then it becomes part of your habitual practice, and you get out there. It becomes a normal way of exercising. The same thing with dating in this kind of casual but intentional way. It becomes a normal way of getting to know people that you're interested in. So here's the plan. So this is my 5-step plan. Plan for it, support it, let it breathe, name it, and try it. Really easy. Actually, I read it backwards. Sorry. We're going to start with try it, name it, let it breathe, support it, and plan for it. Okay, so step 1, try it. Here's one student who finally got up the courage to ask a guy out on a date. I'm quoting the student now. My heart was beating out of my chest as I started walking to his dorm. I felt my hands start to sweat and get clammy. I was confused as to why I was so nervous to see him. We've been friends since the beginning of the school year, and I've been to his dorm room so many times. I don't know why I felt like this time was any different. I nervously walked into the building and reluctantly moved toward his room. As I lifted my hand to knock on his door, I felt my arm start to shake. It took me a few seconds, but I finally worked up enough courage to knock. I stood there waiting for him to open the door. Stay on step 1, please. Back 1 slide. I stood there waiting for him to open the door, questioning the decision I made to walk over there. As I heard the door open, my slide sank into my stomach. Sorry, not my slide. My heart sank into my stomach, and I immediately felt a rush of butterflies forming inside. I wanted to run away, but instead I smiled and said hi when he saw me. Is it going to be awkward? Of course. Here's another student. Even on a real date, I still felt like the hookup culture was interfering because both of us were so used to not dating that it left us feeling awkward and unsure. But maybe it's just those moments of awkwardness that build up one's relationship muscles. You gain the confidence to ask someone out for a coffee date by, well, asking someone out for coffee. You get the skills you need to approach someone you're interested in by approaching someone you're interested in. And you get better and better at it. If you find that a first date over coffee is too awkward, then the next time you could try asking another guy out for a walk. Sometimes doing an activity together instead of sitting and staring at each other over a latte is less intimidating. It's just like running. You just get used to it and it becomes a natural part of the way. It can change the way you walk through your late teens and early 20s. Get to know people on the front porch where they belong at that stage of intimacy. One student notes, I've never had a conversation like this in college before, where I can just get to know the person without any expectations at the end of the date. Finally, I know that this is risky. You might get hurt and you might even get shot down. A lot of my students certainly have. But what's happening on colleges' campuses across the country is not working. We need a different model. As scary as asking someone out might be, the alternative of hooking up and opting out is worse. I'm asking you to consider whether the person you've had your eyes on for the last few months is worth the risk. Okay, step 2, name it. Listening to students correct each other about how one moves from talking to hanging to becoming official makes it painfully obvious that there are no real markers in today's dating world, other than posting a photo on Instagram. How sad is that? One student admits that young people don't want to commit to a relationship. Instead, and I'm quoting the student here, most people are in this talking stage where they do not have to define their relationships. Perhaps they fear rejection or feel too much pressure to be faithful. Here's another student. I know people who are exclusive, meaning they can't hook up with other people, but they refuse to refer to each other as boyfriend or girlfriend. So they're not allowed to hook up with other people, and they've both agreed to this, but they still refuse to say that they're dating. I've never understood this aspect of the hookup culture because there's literally no difference between dating and being exclusive except their refusal to label it. It's the end of the student quote. So once you've dated someone casually for a couple of weeks, and I encourage you to date several different people at that step 1 casual stage, you don't need to do it like one by one, just like schedule it in, like running. So once you've dated someone casually for a couple of weeks and you're ready to go to the next step, say you want to go on longer dates, dinner and a movie maybe, or a long hike, you clearly state your intentions. You both agree to focus on each other in this way, no more casual dates with others, and you enjoy each other. Now this can go on for months. Think of yourself at the kitchen table. You should spend a lot of time here. Remember, you're dating casually, but with a purpose. You're flexing your relationship muscles to try to figure out the answer to the most important question you'll ever ask. Whom should I love? Judge your dates by their manners. Good manners are an outward sign of an inward disposition to care about the people around them. Set your expectations high. Once you're ready to bring your guard down and let this person really get to know who you are, and you're ready to get to know this person intimately, then you're ready to transition to a serious relationship. This is the point at which you have to think about whether you're ready to utter the words, I love you. When you say those words, everything changes and the stakes go up. Here, the emotional work of dating begins to really take shape. Here, you're building actual relationship muscles that you'll take with you no matter where you end up. Here, you take on each other's joys and sorrows. So step 3, let it breathe. So once you've uttered the 3 little words, does this suddenly become a quasi-marital relationship? Absolutely not. And that's one of the problems on college campuses. The few models of relationships we see walking across campus are these couples that are like cohabitating with each other all the time, have lost their friends. It's not really attractive to those who aren't yet dating. The point of being in a relationship is learning how to love someone in particular intimately. You move beyond yourself and your own needs so you can learn to care for the good of another instead of focusing on your own stuff. Healthy relationships don't close in on themselves. Instead, other people want to be around this couple. If your relationship is closed in on itself too tightly, you'll smother it. And each other. Relationships needn't become all-absorbing. In fact, if exclusive dating entails ignoring your friends, you're setting yourself up for a suffocating marriage. Christian Weiman, the poet that I mentioned earlier, writes, "The great paradox of love, and not just romantic love, is that a closer focus may go hand in hand with a broadened scope. To turn from everything to one face," writes Elizabeth Bowen, "is to find oneself face to face with everything." In a serious relationship, you want to come to know the person as she truly is, and you want to let that person in to get to know you without the masks that you normally wear every day. This is scary, but it's also liberating. Here, you are preparing yourself for the challenges and joys of a happy, lifelong partnership, where the love and friendship between the partners moves outward. Step 4, support it. So once you begin to develop the practice of casual dating, become a dating ambassador. Your own dating successes will encourage others to do the same. You'll surround yourself with a group of people who are choosing something different, and this will make this new alternative a possibility for others. Remember, you're building a peace station, but you're among the first airports to do so. Others will want to build one too. Many students come from unhappy households, so they have good reasons to fear dating. But the thing is that healthy dating is like everything else. If you see other people do it well, you start to want to do the same. So you do, and then you become a model of that for others. This is how change happens, incrementally. Healthy casual dating works best when it's nurtured by a wide web of healthy friendships, and it just takes a few friends to get this started. I've seen it happen. Step 5, plan for it. Students plan for everything except love. And when I say students plan for everything, I mean color-coded, complex kind of to-do lists. I mean, it's pretty exceptional, these organizational skills that young people have. They overplan literally in every other area, but maybe a little planning is called for in the dating world. Take the time to have a plan for your date that includes a strategy for things like the physical intimacy you're comfortable with at this point in your relationship, how you're going to handle the who pays question, what you're willing to share now, strategies for things like how you respond if you're invited back into the dorm room or apartment, how much you're going to allow yourself to drink, what you're going to do if the date goes bad, what your limits are if the date goes better than expected, a plan that keeps you safe and that changes as things in the relationship change, and a plan that allows you to gradually achieve physical and emotional intimacy. So finally, I just want to talk a little bit about when things go off track, as they inevitably do. You might still be thinking, if only it were that easy. There is no way to protect yourself from heartbreak, no way to anticipate the breakup that will leave you feeling annihilated. And 5 rejections in a row for a coffee date is tough to stomach. This talk, though, has tried to sketch out a healthy plan that guides you through this rough terrain in a humane way. When you date casually, you cast a wide net. If you think what's at stake in a first date is finding out whether this gal is your soulmate, you're sunk. There may well be a moment in the process where Cupid's arrow gets launched, but often it's in the middle of things, not at the very beginning. And you might be so struck by Cupid's arrow that you overlook real deficiencies of character. So you need to take a step back and reassess. Or you might be crushed because you want to DTR, define the relationship, but she isn't ready, and you're not sure if she ever will be. Remember that the ask is meant to be done in person. So should the breakup. I hear too many awful stories about being ghosted. It's no wonder young people are hesitant to open themselves up to relationships when one day the person could just disappear from their lives, from their screens, with no prior notice. It's awful. If you want to end the relationship, exit it as gracefully as you entered. There are plenty of ways to let someone down in a way that enables him to maintain his integrity, in a way that crushes him a little less. But be clear and be gentle. And if you're on the receiving end, pick up the pieces, pull yourself together, and keep casting your net. You're worth it. So to review, got the 5 steps. Try it, name it, let it breathe, support it, and plan for it. Statistics reveal what kind of choices college students typically make when they get older. And the results may surprise you. Just like the fact that students are not hooking up as much as we assume, the same is true here. Most adults want to get married. Most college graduates will get married. And most will stay married. Just as hooking up is much less common than you might have initially thought, the rumors about the death of marriage have been greatly exaggerated. Dating in college is important. Date casually. Take things slow. Enjoy another person's company without being burdened by overly ambitious expectations early on. Yet don't ask for too little either. Don't settle for the emptiness of a hookup or the loneliness of opting out. Instead, date with a purpose. This means not dating so casually that you forget that you're actually trying to find someone to love who will love you back. This means not confusing casual dating with casual sex. While you're dating, start to figure out what qualities you're looking for in a partner. Learn how to navigate intimacy. It takes a long time to develop that particular skill. Find out whom you want to love and learn how to love. There's no better time than now. Erotic love fundamentally changes us and makes us more human. We're built for relationships. It's written into the fabric of who we are. I have become more human, more uniquely me, as I've entered more deeply into my relationships as friend, as student, as sister, as wife, as mother. There is no better way to uncover who I truly am. And there's more. Love is fertile. It blossoms in unexpected ways. That college relationship can heal a deeply held wound. It can give hope to a roommate who has only witnessed broken relationships. It can give you the courage to take that career risk. My college boyfriend made me a better writer. I became more ambitious, and I learned to not accept initial rejections as the final word. I also came to believe in myself more because he believed in me. The fruits of this relationship are still with me, even though he isn't. It's all the way across the country. This kind of love is fertile, socially, culturally, but physically too. It's what creates new life. Eros is a multiplier. Trust in it. Hope in it. Be brave for it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. That was such a great talk. I'm going to archive that and save it for my teenagers when the time is right.
Don't think that my own
Seriously.
kids listen to me.
Well, maybe my kids listen to you.
Right.
So before we launch into the Q&A with Professor Moreland, we just want to thank the Christian Union for their sponsorship of this event. Christian Union is a development organization with the mission to bring sweeping spiritual and cultural change to our nation and the world by developing and connecting transformative Christian leaders. Christian Union focuses its activity on America's most influential universities and on professionals in the nation's key cities. Learn more at christianunion.org. So, Anna now has some time to take your questions, but before we get started with that, I just want to remind you that you can drop your questions right now in real time into the chat box on whatever platform you're using. So if you're on Facebook, you can just drop them into the comment section. If you're on YouTube, on the desktop app, you can drop them into the chat box to the right of this stream. And if you're on your phone, it's under the video. Okay, so I have a question lined up from Sarah. And the question is this: you said loneliness is a big issue for young people, but how much dating dysfunction is due to our inability to be single? Do you think being content in singleness is a prerequisite for good relationships?
That's a good question. And I'm not sure that I'm going to say that the answer is yes. At least I find the young people I come into contact with are really single. Like that's not a problem. Of course, being single and sort of embracing, and especially if that's going to be your vocation for life, not to mention, or if you're open to that, embracing that and doing it in a healthy way, of course, that's important. And yet, I guess I would want to hear more from Sarah about what healthy being single means, because it seems to me that that would mean having deep friendships, deep and sustaining friendships. I'll say I've done these dating workshops a little bit that are based kind of on this talk, and I have students do role playing and ask each other out. And I was really struck one time when I was doing this dating workshop, and one student said, "Oh, I can use this 5-point plan to make friends." And I thought, like, ay, ay, ay. I mean, that kind of gave me an insight into what I find is the epidemic of loneliness on campus. I mean, there's a lot to say about technology, obviously, there. Um, so I guess what I want to say to you, Sarah, is that yes, be healthy as a single person, but do I find that that issue as a sort of marker of dysfunction in young people today? Not so much.
Okay, so we have our next question from Abigail, and she wants to know, what is your opinion on gender roles in dating? Should both genders take the lead?
Yeah, so my opinion is that if I hadn't taken the lead and asked my now husband out, I might still be single. So I am in favor, especially given the fact that trying to date at all is sort of seems to be this kind of gargantuan effort. A lot of times women are more courageous than men. That's just a fact. And so we need to kind of harness that courage and rehabilitate this social script that's been lost. And it might be that women are the ones who take that lead, as women have taken so many other leads and so many other kind of aspects of cultural change. So I'm here to say to Abigail, take the lead.
Well, I'm here to say I totally agree with that response. So, so thank you for that. Um, okay, so thank you again for such a wonderful talk. Before we sign off for the evening, we'd like to recognize one of our weekend sponsors again, the Wheatley Institute at Brigham Young University, the Pontifical John Paul II Institute at the Catholic University of America, and the Christian Union at America's most influential universities from the Ivy League to the West Coast, the Heritage Foundation advancing the principles of free enterprise, limited government, individual freedom, traditional American values, and a strong national defense, and the Leadership Institute, helping young conservatives maintain strong voices on their college campuses. So if you found today's conversation insightful, please invite a friend. If you're on YouTube or Facebook, please like our page or leave a comment. Tomorrow, we'll be discussing the neuroscience of pornography with Dr. Hilton and how to win at work and home life with Professor Banyulo. And finally, real talk from Sharif and Gabby Gurgis about PhDs and babies. That's it for tonight, and we will see you tomorrow.